Thanks everyone so much for joining us for Organic Pest and Weed Management for Service Providers in the South. This is one in a series of our webinars geared for service providers. It's a part of a Southern SSARE project that we're working on with Florida organic growers and other advisors within their region. So thanks so much for joining us. If you haven't already, stay tuned for some of the other content we've got going on. We also had a previous webinar on Organic 101, which you can find on our website for free. I encourage everybody to check it out. I also just wanted to start at the top of the hour, letting everybody know that there will be CEUs available for this webinar, and we'll have a QR code at the end that you can scan and add for that. So please stay tuned for that QR code at the end. And one last thing before we really dive in is that we do have a field day coming soon in the region. It will most likely be in South Florida, but details are coming soon. If you're on the OFRF mailing list, then you'll definitely find information about this. As well, Florida Organic Growers will be sharing information about that field day coming soon. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. Who have been talking, I'm Mary Hathaway. I'm the Research and Education Program Manager here with the Organic Farming Research Foundation. I'll be moderating today's webinar, so if you have any questions or back of the house issues, I am here for you. And we're also joined by our lovely presenter, Rebecca Champagne, who is the Conservation Scientist here at the Organic Farming Research Foundation. And next slide. Before we dive into the content, I did want to give just a moment more introduction to our organization, the Organic Farming Research Foundation. We are a national nonprofit that was founded in 1990 with the mission to foster and improve the widespread adoption of organic farming systems. We do this in three key ways. First is our research arm. So we started with research. We saw the need there to support organic research. So the organic farmers really had the science that they needed to continue doing the work that we were doing. So we do this with things like making sure that research is available, lifting up research on things like our Organic Research Hub that you can check out online that really shares and makes an easy way to search for the organic research that's out there and relevant to your operation. This feeds right into our next bucket where we really focus our attention, which is education. We really pride ourselves in making sure that all that great research that's out there gets distilled into an accessible, applicable format for farmers, other researchers, technical service providers such as yourself. We have resources in just about every format, education in just about every format that you can imagine, including webinars like this, other videos, fact sheets, etc. So please check out a lot of our different free resources on our website. And finally, this all feeds into the thing that's so important is advocacy, making sure that the folks up on the Hill in their respective states or national places actually understand what challenges organic producers have and give it that importance. And we want to make sure that we're advocating for those policies that organic farmers and researchers really need. I'm sure this is top of mind if anyone has been working on an OREI grant lately. They're due tomorrow, so best of luck to anyone that's on this. Okay, and with that, thank you. I'm really excited about today's webinar. From here, I'm going to let Rebecca take it over. Take it away, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mary. And thanks everyone for being here. I know the growing season is really kicking off now, so we really appreciate that you're taking the time to be here and to learn some stuff from us. So we're going to start with a quick introduction covering some of the main reasons that pest and weed management are so important for farmers, not just organic farmers, but any farmer, but then focus more on the systems approach that is taken in organic production. From there, we're going to cover some of the national organic program regulations related to this, common pests that are seen in the Southern SSARE region, as well as some really awesome research takeaways. And we will have time for a Q&A at the end. And as we go, if you have any questions at the top of your mind, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will answer them at the end. All right, so we have done, OFRF has done a number of organic surveys through our National Organic Research Agenda. And through these surveys of organic farmers and transitioning to organic farmers, we've found that over the years, pest and weed management continues to rank at the very top of production challenges. This is seen across all regions of the US, across farm sizes, across crop types. it is consistently ranking as one of the biggest production challenges. So it's a really big source of uncertainty and stress for farmers. It requires a lot of observation, trial and error, and constant pivots in management to really figure out what's going to work for an operation. So weeds, insects, and diseases contribute a lot to crop yield loss, and they can also affect the quality of the crop. This is going to reduce the amount of marketable product that the farmer can sell, and is therefore going to affect their income. So if they're selling grain to a grain buyer, the quality of the grain, or if they're selling direct to consumer, through a market kind of stream, the marketable product is really what's driving that income there. And pest management is also really labor intensive, so that's going to affect the economic management of the operation. And then one thing that you may not always think about is that pest management can also affect the consumer. So if a farmer is facing high pest pressure and is reducing the amount of marketable product that they can sell, it's going to affect product availability on the shelf for consumers, and therefore food safety and the prices of products. So although a lot of the effects are really seen right on the farm, it can also trickle down to affecting the consumer. So organic farmers are really taking a true systems approach to pest management, and this uses many of the principles that are defined in integrated pest management, or IPM. I know a lot of people see IPM as being a conventional term, but a lot of the principles that are used in IPM are also very true to the systems approach that organic farmers use. So farmers are really becoming familiar with the common pests on their operation or in their region, and then they're using strategies to prevent those pests from reaching economically damaging levels. And then after implementing various strategies, using frequent monitoring to assess what's working or what might require further action past what's already been done. So it's constant evaluation. So in the next slide, we are going to cover some examples of what these steps look like. But I just want to reiterate that a lot of these principles of IPM are what's standard for the systems approach in organic pest management. So at the core of organic pest and weed management is this concept of many little hammers. I used to do weed science research, and this was a really, really big term in organic weed management, coined in the late 90s, early 2000s by a bunch of weed scientists. And this refers to really using multiple approaches rather than just relying on one silver bullet for pest management. So organic pest management really starts with learning. What are the weeds, the insects, and the diseases that are common in your region and on your farm? And learning how they thrive. What's their preferred habitat? What's their life cycle? Do they have any natural enemies? And taking that information from there, a farmer can set what they would consider an action threshold. So what do they consider to be the economic or the loss threshold that they want to set before any sort of additional action is taken for pest management. So this threshold can vary based on the crop or the farmer's own tolerance for a specific pest. So out of all of the IPM principles, prevention is really the biggest one for organic farmers, particularly through cultural and biological pest management strategies. So we will discuss some of these strategies more in the coming slides, but overall prevention is really at its core looking at things like building soil health to support the health of the crops and the resiliency of the crops, providing habitat and increasing biodiversity on the farm to support beneficial organisms, using practices that help boost the competitiveness of the crop, and exclusion methods like row covers, for example. So monitoring how these methods work on the farm is really key. So through this monitoring, determining if a greater response is needed or a completely different one. All right, so now we'll briefly cover the National Organic Program, specifically the pest management regulations within it, and then some of the examples of what farmers can do to meet those requirements. So if anyone on the call today attended our Organic 101 webinar in March, You'll recall our discussion of what the National Organic Program is all about, which is typically referred to as the NOP. So for those of you who were not at that webinar, we encourage you to check it out on our website. You can watch the on-demand recording for free. But I'll just give a quick rundown of what the NOP is. So this is the USDA's federal regulatory program for organically produced products in the US. So the NOP has several duties. So the main one being developing and then enforcing the organic standards for crops, livestock, as well as product handling and imports. They also investigate any complaints of organic regulation violations, which are submitted to them by certifying agencies. They also manage the Organic Integrity Database, which is the online database on all certified organic operations in the country. And the NOP also updates these organic standards using input from the National Organic Standards Board, which is a board made up of researchers and farmers and other professionals who are providing science-based information to help keep these regulations current and updated. So specifically, in subpart C of the NOP handbook, which Mary is dropping in the chat, the page that lives on, subpart C, statute 205.206, is the one that encompasses the regulations for crop, pest, weed, and disease management. So without the use of synthetic pesticides, organic farmers really need to rely on multiple strategies to manage these pests. And the NOP outlines specifically the use of crop rotation, the proper selection of plant species and varieties. So for example, plants that are well adapted to the region, providing habitat for beneficial insects and natural enemies of pests, and the use of approved biological controls and other approved substances. So you might think, well, organic doesn't use pesticides, but there are organic approved materials, some of which I will reference in future slides. And in order to use a product like that, a farmer would need to get approval from their certifier that they work with and get certified through every year. But there are a number of more synthetic type products that are approved for use in organic production. They're just a bit different than what a conventional farmer would use. They should also, for weeds, they should be using practices like mulching, grazing, flame weeding, mowing, and then using sanitation measures. So that can look like removing plant materials from production areas that have been infested with a pest, managing the spread of weed seeds, so managing weeds before they can produce seeds, and then removing any sort of habitat that might harbor pests. All right, so here's some examples. For managing weeds, using cover crops is a great one for competing with weeds. Using physical weed control methods, so tillage, like primary and secondary tillage prior to crop planting, in-season cultivation, using hand tools or hand weeding if you're at a smaller scale. This is particularly useful in the crop row where those weeds are harder to get with like a tractor-drawn implement without damaging the crop. So you might have to go back in and manage things that are growing right around the crop with hand tools or hand weeding. Mulches, so this could be from plant materials or what's very common in organic production is the black plastic mulches. Mowing can be really great in the crop alleys, grazing livestock after crop harvest, and flame weeding. That's a really fun one. I have used flame weeders before, and they are really, really great for those small seeded, slow emerging crops, particularly carrots. Also selecting crop varieties that may be more competitive against weeds. So looking for varieties that have fast growth or a bigger canopy, for example. And seed catalogs usually do a really good job of that, or on their websites, if you're looking at different varieties, it will tell you some of the growth habits. And farmers can also, using other agronomic type of considerations, manipulating crop seeding rate, a higher seeding rate, or a narrower row spacing to help close that crop canopy and increase the competitiveness with weeds. So some examples for managing insects. Timing crop planting with the known insect life cycles. So some of the research findings I'll talk about will look at this a little bit more. But for example, if you know that you have a specific pest that lays its eggs a certain time of year, delaying crop planting by 1 to 2 weeks to not coincide with that egg laying period, or harvesting before the uh, primary feeding time of an insect, for example. So thinking about their life cycle and when you can kind of um, eliminate those gaps and that overlap. Um, so also rotating a field, that's a really big one. So if you had a pest issue one year, rotating that field the next season to a non-host crop. Traps and repellents are really great options. Pulling them away from the production areas and trapping them. Planting habitat that's going to increase biodiversity and provide habitat for natural enemies of pests. Biological controls. So biggest example using parasitoid wasp species. Pheromones, there are organic approved pheromones that can actually disrupt the mating of insects, and it won't um, re reduce their population, but it won't increase it. So it's just helping that increase in that breeding season. And then, like I mentioned, there are organic approved pesticides out there. So neem oil is a big one. Diatomaceous earth is another. Spinosad products, which is the active ingredient in a lot of organic improved insecticides, which is not a product endorsement for anything, but that's just a really big active ingredient. And like I mentioned, the approach here is really that farmers should try to be using these preventive measures first and building the soil health and building plant health, building natural enemy populations. It is popular to use organic approved pesticides, but they always have to be approved for use by the certifier. And the NOP actually outlines that their use should be justified and outlined in the farmer's organic system plan. So always a good option to have it in the toolbox. And for managing diseases, so a really diverse crop rotation is going to be great. So rotating through different crop families, it's going to help break pathogen life cycles if you're rotating to a non-host crop. In closer growing environments, so high tunnels, for example, which is very popular for organic vegetable production, pruning and thinning to help improve that air circulation. So you think about what kind of environment is going to be really great for diseases, and it's going to be hot and humid. So helping with that air circulation is really good. I mentioned some sanitation measures. So if you have infected plant tissue or debris, removing that from the production areas. Also thinking about that hot and humid environment, utilizing drip irrigation instead of sprinklers because it's going to help reduce the amount of moisture on the crop foliage. You can use soil solarization. This is with clear plastic tarps. This helps kill soil-borne pathogens. And then also that focus on soil health, building soil organic matter, supporting the soil microbiome. This is all going to lead to a more disease suppressive soil and plant health, better nutrient uptake by the plants, and better plant resiliency. And again, there's also a number of approved organic materials like horticultural oils and copper fungicides. So now we're going to briefly cover some of the common weeds, insects, and diseases found in the Southern SSARE region. These are not exhaustive lists. They're just some of the species that are really common, and they are well adapted to that region and its climate. And since the monitoring is the really big part of that organic pest management approach, we thought it would be good to show some pictures of what these pests look like. So we're not going to cover all of the, the scientific info behind each of these, but having that visual, I think, is really important for knowing what is in the field. And I'm also going to give a big shout out to this website, ipmimages.org. Really amazing pictures of weeds and insects and diseases. It's a searchable database of images, and you can see weeds, insects, and diseases in different crop production areas, non-production areas, different crop types. So I think it's a really good tool to have when you're thinking about that monitoring and scouting. So some common weeds. Some are annual broadleaves and grasses, some creeping perennial species. So redroot pigweed, common lamb's quarters, ragweed. If any of you have allergies, you'll understand. Large crabgrass, and then the creeping perennial weeds, the morning glory and the field bindweed. So these are some of the common weeds in the region. And then some lovely insect pictures. You know, I used to be afraid of insects until I took entomology in college and had to make an insect collection to pass the class. So I quickly got over that fear. But here's some really awesome pictures of what some of these insects look like. I don't have any pictures on this slide of beneficial insects, but those are just as important to become familiar with. So when you're scouting for insects in the field, you know what is a good bug and a bad bug. So you have aphids, thrips, different species of weevils, spider mites, armyworm, and cotton bollworm are some good examples of insect pests in the South. And same for some common diseases that really thrive in that hot and humid environment. I think we all know about citrus greening. Root knot nematodes, root rot, rusts, powdery mildew, and southern blight. All really big ones to look out for. All right, so this last section today, which will be the bulk of everything, it's going to cover some really cool pest management research. So we're going to give a high-level overview of the research and then some of the practical takeaways that can be used on farms. So this is not meant to give you a complete rundown of all the materials and methods and everything of the study, but rather more what is the research question, a little bit about what they did, what they found, and then what really is the big takeaway from that can be implemented on a farm. So we'll go in order of some weeds research, insect-based research, and then disease research. So cover crops. So the high temperatures and precipitation in the southern SSARE region, really great for producing high cover crop biomass. When I was in my research career and was working with cover crops in an organic setting, I was in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, where sometimes your growing season does not allow you to get really high cover crop biomass for weed suppression. Lucky for the South, the really hot temperatures are very conducive to getting a lot of cover crop biomass. But this also means that these conditions are going to favor the growth of weeds as well. Particularly the really fast-growing and highly competitive summer annual species. So cover crops can be a great weed suppression tool, but they are not going to be the sole method for managing weeds in an organic system. So this meta-analysis looked at 300 study comparisons of organic systems in the Southeast. And they found that cover crops overall are really going to help reduce the density of weeds, but are likely not reducing the biomass of the weeds that do survive. Weeds are really good at finding a space that they can occupy and then growing quickly in that space. So cover crops are going to be most often useful when they are planted in the fall after crop harvest or as a quick spring cover crop prior to the start of that growing season. It's going to help drive down the density of the weeds there prior to your crop planting. So in these study comparisons, it was found that the biomass of the cover crop was that driving factor behind lowering the weed densities. And these researchers suggested that cover crops should be reaching at least 6,000 pounds per acre in biomass to help reduce weed densities. But the good news is that cover crops are also going to provide some co-benefits. They help build soil health. They can be a habitat for pollinators or beneficial insects. They can help with nutrient management. So they're really providing other benefits outside of weed control that are contributing to that prevention aspect of pest management. So a big component of organic weed management is to increase the crop's competitiveness against the weeds. This can really be done through cultural methods such as manipulating the crop row spacing and also the seeding rate. So this study was conducted over 2 years in North Carolina, and it looked at different seeding rates and row spacings in canola production, in winter canola specifically, and then how that influenced canola yield, weed pressure, and then also the ability to actually perform in-season cultivation using large tractor-mounted sweeps that would run between the crop row. So they looked at seeding rates of 3 to 15 pounds per acre, and they did it in 3-pound increments. And then they looked at 3 different row spacings. So 6.5 inches, 13 inches, and 26 inches. They found that the 26-inch row spacing was really the best for performing that in-season cultivation between the crop rows, which did help reduce weed biomass. The smaller row spacings, it became harder to actually get those sweeps in between the crop rows without causing crop damage. So they recommended that if you had the high enough weed pressure that you wanted to be running sweeps for in-season cultivation, that 26-inch row spacing was probably best. But then for seeding rate, they saw that the canola yields were remaining similar even when seeding rate was at the very low end of that range. So they really saw a lot of crop plasticity. So the ability of the crop to really fill in that space even at a lower seeding rate. So the biggest takeaway from this is that both of these cultural practices can be utilized, but they can be flexible based on the weed pressure at a specific site. So higher weed pressure, maybe increase the seeding rate, but widen the row spacing so that you can still run a cultivation implement, or tightening up the row spacing if you have a lower weed pressure. So for crops with that higher plasticity like canola, you can kind of be more flexible in it. So another systems approach to organic weed management is the selection of crops that are well adapted to the growing environment. And this can really help with that crop competitiveness and resiliency. So one crop that's becoming increasingly of interest is the Brassica species carinata. There's a lot of research being done on this right now, which is why I want to highlight it. So this crop has a really high heat tolerance. It also has really high biomass potential. It also has higher concentrations of specific acids in it compared to other Brassica species and like rapeseed oil, for example. So some of these acids, they're not used for human consumption, but they're primarily for industrial purposes. So like manufacturing lubricants, surfactants, like the skin and hair care industries. So as consumer demand for more organic actual products, not just food products, increases, thinking about what you can get out of a crop like this is really important. So this study was conducted over 2 years in Florida, and they examined the addition of carinata in their crop rotation and how it affected weed pressure. So it was grown over the winter months before either cotton or peanuts, and then they examined the weed biomass in the cotton and peanut phases of the rotation. So they also took soil samples and looked at, if you're familiar with weed seed bank assays, usually soil cores are taken at the beginning of each growing season, grown out in a greenhouse, and you see which weed species germinate from that. And it's a good indicator of what kind of weeds are most present in the soil in your fields. So they found that when they included carinata in their rotation, the summer weed species that were present in cotton and peanut were reduced. And then at the end of the 2-year study, the overall seed bank was also reduced. So thinking about that crop diversification is really important. Okay, so now we'll switch gears to some insect pest management. So many organic specialty crop growers are going to be utilizing high tunnels on their operations. There's so many positives for crop production with these, but can also make pest management difficult. So it's a more protected and really high crop density environment. This can lead to rapid pest population growth and better, easier, I guess I'll say easier movement of pests between crop plants. So one method that organic farmers can use is the cultural prevention strategy that is referred to as push-pull. And I think this diagram here, which is from the University of Florida, does a really good job showing this. So this involves using plants that will both attract and sustain the beneficial insects, while also repelling and trapping the pests. So this method has been tested in high tunnel vegetable production in Florida and Georgia. So they used push crops such as mustard, garlic, citronella, or lemongrass, and they planted these near the main cash crop rows in the high tunnels. And then they also used volatile compounds and sticky cards to pull the insect pests away. So you're pushing them away with certain crops and then pulling them towards the traps or the volatile compounds. So they found that this method increased the populations of beneficial insects like lady beetles, soldier beetles, parasitoid wasps, and lacewings. And it also reduced the populations of whiteflies, aphids, and thrips. And they also recommended that a farmer could do additional companion planting on the perimeter of the high tunnel to further increase biodiversity and attract more beneficials using different flowers or herbs. Okay, so really big pest in the US, spotted winged Drosophila. This is a type of fruit fly. They are the leading pest of berries and stone fruits in the United States. This is for both organic and conventional growers. So the larvae, they live inside of the fruit. They are highly destructive. This makes the infested fruit completely unmarketable by the USDA grading standard, so they can really decimate a crop. So this is going to reduce the crop yield. It's going to reduce the amount of marketable product a farmer can sell. And they're also developing a lot of resistance to both conventional insecticides and organic ones, unfortunately. So organic improved insecticides, I believe, what's the trade name? And Trust, that's a really big one. It's very commonly used when the use of it is warranted and the fruit flies are starting to get resistance. So since monitoring is really paramount to organic pest management, there's some ongoing research right now that's looking at when that monitoring can be done and where. So looking at monitoring different locations around the farm and different life stages. So across different regions of the US, it's been found that monitoring the field edges first and looking for the eggs and that first instar larvae is going to actually help provide earlier detection of this fruit fly before it gets to the cash crop. So it's going to help a farmer implement other measures before a potential insecticide application. So there was some research done that looked at that method of field edge monitoring instead of just crop field monitoring. And they found that it actually, in some cases, could help reduce the organic insecticide application rate by about 50%. So from spraying every X number of weeks, it was cut in about half. It really also really big part of fruit fly management is biological controls. So we talked about supporting biodiversity. It's really going to help those populations of parasitoid wasps. So this is also being studied around the US, and it's found that these wasps are really going to help reduce those fruit fly populations. And again, with the field edges, it's been found too that these wasps are particularly useful in field edge habitat. So supporting biodiversity around the fields is equally as important and provides that environment for those natural enemies, which is going to help slow the spread of the fruit flies into the actual production areas. Still a lot of ongoing research. It's a very hard pest to control. And insects, cotton bollworm, another major pest in the South. And I wanted to highlight some recommendations that have been made by the national cotton states. They have an arthropod pest management working group. And so obviously scouting is, of course, high importance. So looking for the eggs and the larvae or the feeding damage of the bollworm. But they also recommend some really great cultural and that systems-based approach that any farmer can take that also fit really well within organic pest management. So if possible, they recommend avoiding late cotton planting. This really helps so that the growing season does not overlap as much with the life of the bollworm. Also selecting earlier maturing cotton varieties. So earlier maturing cotton varieties spend less time in the flowering stage. And the flowering stage is when most of that bollworm feeding is occurring. So it's helping reduce the amount of time that that cotton might spend during the feeding stage of the pest. They also recommend selecting varieties with smoother leaves. So the bollworm moth, it becomes a moth at the end of its cycle. They lay their eggs on the cotton leaves, and they prefer cotton with hairier leaf surfaces because it helps the eggs stick better. So selecting cotton varieties that have smoother leaves is going to help reduce the chance of those eggs sticking. Also, a really great recommendation, following nutrient management best practices. So avoiding excessive nitrogen application, that's a really big one. Excessive nitrogen application in cotton will lead to larger, bushier plants that have delayed maturity, and that extends their exposure to bollworms. So a lot of these recommendations are really based on the life cycle of the pest and when it's laying its eggs, when it's doing most of its feeding, and thinking about ways to work around that. All right, so some disease research. So anaerobic soil disinfestation, which I'll refer to as ASD. This is another really good tool for organic growers in managing diseases. So this is a process that is an alternative to chemical fumigation. It involves the addition of readily decomposable carbon amendments and then irrigating the soil to saturation under an airtight, clear tarp. This is going to result in a burst of anaerobic microbial activity. And during this anaerobic phase, the soil microbes are decomposing the carbon amendments. This is going to result in various soil metabolites like fatty acids and volatile compounds, which increase the disease suppressiveness of the soil. So it's going to affect the viability of the pathogens in the soil, and it can also influence the viability of weed seeds in the soil. So in Florida, researchers examined the effect of ASD versus using compost to build soil health, or they had a control treatment, which used neither the ASD or the compost. So they looked at weed density, and they also looked at bottom rot incidence. So this is caused by rhizoctonia. And they also looked at crop yield inequality, and this was done in romaine and oak leaf lettuce that was direct seeded into organically managed high tunnels, and then it was harvested as baby leaf lettuce. So the ASD treatment compared to the compost and the control reduced the bottom rot incidence in the lettuce by 87%, and then reduced the number of weeds by 50%. And it did not increase lettuce yields, but it didn't decrease them either. So there was no effect on yield, which is actually great news because it's really the driving thing behind it was that effect on the rhizoctonia, the soil pathogen, and it did not affect the yields. And that picture on the right there is a really great example of what that bottom rot would look like. So with the systems-based approach, organic farmers can also use practices that support the growth and diversity of the microbial community and the health of that soil microbiome. So there's been various Southern SSARE projects that have analyzed the health of the soil microbiome as a disease management tool. And I've highlighted some of the high-level takeaways from that research, really to help build the microbial community. So using green manures, incorporating mustard seed meal into the soil, leaving legume and other cover crop residues, either incorporating them into the soil or leaving them on the soil surface to help enhance arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi colonization. Using cover crops like sun hemp, southern pea, and sorghum Sudan grass, which are really well suited to the southern growing environment. These are really going to help boost the indigenous arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi population. And then using compost. Compost has been shown to boost populations of disease suppressive microbes. So these practices really support both soil and plant health by increasing nutrient availability, helping with nutrient uptake by the plant roots, and then therefore contributing to that greater plant resiliency. And then proper nutrient management to build soil health can also serve as a preventive disease management tool. So research has examined organic soil amendment effects on nematodes. So organic farmers can't use synthetic fertilizers, but there are a number of plant and animal sourced materials that can be used, which I'm just referring to here as organic soil amendments. So it's been found that using organic soil amendments can help build soil organic matter and those volatile organic compounds in the soil, which creates a less conducive habitat for nematodes. These amendments are really helping enhance populations of soil microorganisms. And overall, these soil health benefits are going to help enhance plant vigor and resistance. And some other research on nematode control has also found that planting cover crops of Brassica species or sun hemp in particular can be really beneficial. So Brassica species have isothiocyanate compounds in them, and sun hemp has allelopathic compounds, which are contributing to that disease suppressiveness of the soil. We got through that a lot quicker than I thought. That's okay. We'll have plenty of time for questions, or we can give people some time back, which is also appreciated. But we have some other resources that Mary's going to drop into the chat that we think you'll find really useful for learning more about organic pest and weed management, and including our organic research hub. We launched that last spring, and it's a really great open access tool, free to use. It's a repository of organic information. So you can go in and you can search by region, you can search by topic, lots of different types of materials as well. So not just peer-reviewed literature. There's also toolkits and fact sheets and webinars, even some podcasts on there. It's a really great resource for learning about lots of different crops and different practices in organic environments. And with that, I will pass it back over to Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. That was great. It was really wonderful to hear a lot more about these research takeaways when it comes to dealing with pests and disease management and weeds in the South, because we have a lot of them. We don't have any questions in the chat at this time, so I encourage you, if you're on the webinar right now, please ask away. We did have one great question in the registration regarding how extension can help with the connection between the certification, like making sure that farmers are doing what they're allowed to do in the certification and kind of what they're actually doing in practice. So I don't know if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, great question. Well, a farmer is really going to work closely with their certifier and developing their organic system plan, which should be outlining all the ways, all the different practices they're going to use on their farm to meet those various National Organic Program regulations. And as for someone in extension, it's not extension's job to enforce those NOP regulations, but being familiar with them, I think, is going to be very helpful. So that if an organic farmer asks you a question about what they can, like, what do you recommend I do about this problem, you're not making recommendations that are going to jeopardize their organic certification. I think the really big takeaway from all of this is that you're thinking about ways to prevent those pests, weeds, and diseases from even reaching a threshold that's going to be very damaging or very decimating. So thinking of ways to build that soil health first. What are practices that any farmer can use to build soil health and to build plant health? It's going to support that greater resiliency against pests in the first place and help reduce the pest pressure overall before you have to think about really intensive management. But there's a lot at play here. I think another big takeaway is that thinking of practices that organic farmers use that are going to support other parts of their operations. So I talked about like the co-benefits of cover crops. Like, yes, they can be a really great way to manage weeds after crop harvest during those winter months, but they're not going to be the only thing you rely on, but they are going to provide other benefits to your soil health and your nutrient management. So thinking about practices that a farmer can use that are going to check more than one box.
That's great. Thank you, Rebecca. Great. Well, while we're waiting, if there are any questions from anyone that is here right now, we'd love to hear them. But I will plug, we are going to have upcoming field day. A part of this work is that we want to make sure that extension agents and other service providers, you guys have a chance to go to some of these organic farms, get a chance to see kind of what's going on and how these different practices, like Rebecca was talking about, are managed. And so we'll have those details coming soon. Please stay updated. And we have just a question now coming in from Madeline. Could you touch upon ASD again? Anaerobic soil disinfestation. Can you touch on that? Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that you'd like to know about? I mean, I I don't know everything about it, but I can just, if you'd like, I can reiterate some of that information. So, but if you have any like really specific questions, I have the chat open as well. But yeah, so this is a really, I'm not familiar with. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
got you. Yeah, so it's really to help build the disease suppressiveness of the soil. So um, in conventional systems, there are methods to do chemical fumigation or use conventional fungicides. Anaerobic soil disinfestation is going to incorporate some sort of carbon amendment into the soil, lay down a clear tarp over it, and then irrigate under that tarp, so like a drip irrigation system, until the soil is saturated. And because it's sealing all of that in, and then providing the sunlight through the clear plastic, it's creating an anaerobic environment. So it's cutting, that airtight tarp is creating that anaerobic environment where the microbes in the soil are going to break down those carbon amendments. It produces metabolites in that process. So I'm not a soil scientist, but what I know about it is that during that anaerobic phase, as they break down those amendments, they're going to produce fatty acids, they're going to produce volatile compounds, and those compounds in the soil are going to reduce the viability of the soil-borne pathogens. And then you can remove the tarp, and then you've got a soil that has less active pathogens in the soil, and then it can also reduce the germination of weed seeds as well. Mostly like smaller weed seeds that aren't as they don't last as long as the soil or don't have as hard of a seed coat. But it is one option I'd say maybe like at a smaller scale farm can use, because installing tarps on a large scale is not fun. I've had to do them in a research setting, and even in a small scale, it can be kind of cumbersome. But it is a great way to help boost the compounds in soil that are going to suppress the actual activity and the viability of those soil-borne pathogens. And Thelma dropped some resources in the chat as well. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. Wonderful. Well, we hope you all enjoyed all this great content that Rebecca put together. Please be on the lookout. We will have another webinar coming to you soon in the next 3 months here. We're doing these quarterly, so we're excited to keep these series going. If there's not anything else, we're going to go ahead and give that time back. If anyone has any issues accessing the CEUs, please feel free to reach out to myself or Rebecca, and we'll be happy to help you. And with that, thanks for joining us. Again, all of our webinars are recorded and shared on our website, so please check it out. If you're looking for any other resources, and I can't encourage you enough to check out the hub, the research hub. There's so much great stuff there, curated to exactly what you're looking for. Thanks,
Yes,
everyone.
thank you, everyone. And I'll also add for anyone that's still on that we are doing this webinar again in 2 weeks, but for service providers and extension in the Western SARE region. So some of the content will be the same, some will be focused on research specific to the Western region. So if you have extension and service provider friends in the Western SARE region, please tell them about it. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. And for any crop advisors on the call who are looking for the pest management credits, you can scan the QR code with your CCA app, but if you have any issues with it, please email me so I can record your info for the science societies. And I'll leave it up there for a second, but yeah, thanks so much again, everyone, for being here.